Hmm.
Thursday.
Thursday,
Thursday.
beautiful weather, central Amsterdam, 5 p.m.
Today we have Dusya Lyubovskaya.
Nicely pronounced, Lyubovskaya. I like
I
that.
just got an award from her for
I can see
pronouncing it.
a lot of nodding. I'm sure people have messed that name up a lot in the history. We're going to talk to her about life after losing both parents, which is pretty intense topic and one that most people would like to avoid if they can. And just because we're wonderful chaos, that's exactly what we're going to bring on. We're going to discuss that on
A wonderful.
chaos.
To begin with,
I saw your hand. I saw your finger, and I was going to wave with you.
I did it intentionally. To begin with, how are you, Mr. Shalef, on this sunny Amsterdam? 21 degrees. Like 21 degrees in my country, it's,
Yeah.
cardigan weather. Over here, people just take their clothes off.
Yeah.
They're in the sun.
Yeah,
It's like bliss.
there's something that people don't really understand about the Netherlands, and there's an interesting phenomena. When the sun comes out, Dutch people get in a line like pigeons on all of the south facing sun sort of area. So on a bridge, you'll see like 7 people sort of sunning themselves, like, oh, this is the last time I'm going to be able to see you for a while, almost like welcoming an old friend.
Yeah.
And I always have people who have never seen it before ask me about it, like, what's going on there? And I'm like, that's sort of what we'd call like a Dutch version of sun worshiping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in a way, it's raining a lot and it's
Yeah.
cloudy. So when the sun comes out, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
And I spent the day working at home.
Did you?
Yeah, today was a working day. I had to catch up a little bit.
I think it's hard for people to understand if they haven't lived in a climate which has this much rain and sort of just overcasting, where you don't get to see the sun, like how depressing it can be to have prolonged periods without sun. You can explain it to somebody, but if they haven't had that experience themselves, it's really hard to understand the impact that has. Yeah.
I kind of, the one thing that I'm going to miss in Holland is actually the cold.
Yeah, I know you said that.
Yeah.
You talk about missing Holland like you don't think you might come back at some point.
It's open, right?
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, I will come back, but I just don't know under what conditions.
Yeah, it's not clearly that's going to happen.
Yeah. But definitely, definitely can feel the benefits of the cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Being raised in California, I only got to experience cold when I got into my, say, 20s, when I lived in places that had, snow where I lived. Like in Japan, I lived in a place that had a lot of snow. And they didn't have central heating, so I had a
California's
gas.
quite hot, right?
Yeah, it's hot. Yeah, it's warm. It's like, it's like when you don't really know whether it's winter or summer because the trees basically look the same all year long. That's when you're in a place that doesn't have a cold season.
And I call my mother every day. Hey, mom, how are you? It's hot. And we're talking 45 degrees. And for her, if she doesn't get up early to go to the supermarket, then for her, she can't go out because, she's...
45 degrees is, you've seen it all in the news, right? There's fires all over Greece at the moment.
And Cyprus.
Yeah. And Iris Ulfer says, make the most of the sun, baby. True, I take vitamin D to replace the natural one.
And just to hide an awareness, viewers, we're not talking about the weather because we're postponing life and after loss.
Yeah, exactly.
It was really a genuine thing.
Yeah, it's not like we don't want to spend a full hour talking about one of the hardest subjects to engage. It's not like that at all.
Well, as I was sitting here, though, just feeling like only my mother's alive right now.
Yeah.
And I talk to her every day. Yeah. And I mean, one of the main reasons why I'm going back end of the year for 3 months is to be more much closer to her.
Yeah.
And even though she's healthy, you never fucking know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, me imagining that my mom would be gone was the reason why I wrote her the letter. And I do believe that if we're really sensitive to that and we take it seriously, which is the book, the reason why the book is called The Last Letters, because the letter I wrote my mom, obviously. The thing that I see is that exactly that thing, which is the hardest to embrace, is the thing that gives us the impetus to take action and to say, hey, like you said, I'm going to go home and spend this time with my mom because I don't know when it'll be the last time.
Yeah.
And there's something really beautiful about that. Yeah.
Well, I feel the same way about you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You and Ronnie always are angry at me because I always say I could go.
No, I'm not angry at you, but it's like, how would you feel if Rani would die before you?
It would suck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's that. It sucks.
Yeah, it would suck.
And knowing how you'd want us to celebrate your life as opposed to having like I'll definitely play Jesus Christ Superstar at your funeral.
Yeah. Jesus Christ Superstar, that song I never know the name of. I'll have to write it down so I can remember it in the future. Yes.
So, shall we bring our wonderful guests?
Yes, we
on?
shall. We must. We will. Dusya, baby.
Hello. How are you all?
You realize that when I look through your bio, you had 5 things you wanted to talk about. And then you had this little item that said, both my parents are gone. And I didn't look at anything you really wanted to talk about. I said, that item there, that's what I want to talk about. So how did you feel when I came to you and said, how do you, let's have a show discussing how it feels not to have your parents anymore?
I think the best way I can ask this question is it's kind of a unique situation, and especially in my age at that time, like I was in my early 30s when I suddenly didn't have any parents. I don't know even know where to start. Like when after my mother's passing, I remember I went somewhere on Sunday, and I was just listening to people around me, and then there was this a former acquaintance of mine, and she was at that time 45 years old, and she was talking to her husband and some people, some friends of hers, and she was saying that she was visiting her parents, and I think that's when it felt like someone put like a knife or something to my heart.
Yeah.
Because I thought, okay, I mean, I wasn't even able to put the words, like I wasn't able to verbalize how that made me feel. I just remember, like, I just felt so, I can't even describe the feeling I had, but it was just like a shock to me. And then I remember talking to somebody else later on and describing this scene, what happened, and he said, yeah, they're older and their parents are still alive. And that did not feel fair to you. And I guess that just nailed it. Because I mean, my mother just passed away, and although my parents died 7 years apart, I felt like a little child who was told that her parents were, that her parents died in a car or airplane crash. It's just like, I don't get it. That's just how I felt in that time. It's like, what? How? Like, it just rationally, it just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I know when I'll talk to people, like right before we got on, I was with 2 people, and someone said, "So what's your show about today?" And then and I said, "Well, how it is to lose both your parents." And then the person's eyes started to tear up because just the thought that they might not have them was enough for them to already imagine the pain of that loss.
Yeah. It's a little bit like the people that raised you and you know, they support you in your journey no longer are there, and then
Yeah.
you're, oh, I'm next, first of all, and secondly, there's
Yeah.
that lifeline, that support is not there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah. I.
psychologically,
Mhm.
I'm curious how it was for you because I lost both of my parents. I think my dad died maybe 10 years ago or something now. My
Mhm.
mom, she died when I was 19 in a car accident. So
Mhm.
that was very dramatic for me then. But what I
Mhm.
noticed was that there was an innocence that was lost in feeling like there was always someone that would take care of me. Like there was an
Mhm.
emotional, like a backstop, like, oh, there'll always be someone to take care of me. And when that went away, there was this feeling like I'm alone in the world.
Mhm.
And I know it very viscerally from the 20 when I was 19. Obviously, it was a very different experience than I was later when I lost my
Mhm.
dad. But yeah, I don't know how it was for both of you because you lost your dad already, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, as well.
I'll let Dusya go
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
I have to say the experience were very different, like from one extreme to another. My father, he was a difficult person, so after his passing, like when we got the phone call that he died, my mother and I, we were both in shock. I mean, although he was a horrible person, but at the same time, we were like, he's dead? Like, and we just hugged each other because we were just both in so much trouble. We couldn't speak, we couldn't think clearly. And shortly after a few weeks, I realized, okay, it's just me and my mother now. And I have to, I mean, I was taking care of her already at that time, but then I realized, okay, this is life now. I am, like, she's, like, if there's a problem, she's going to say, Dusya, help me here, help me here. And on one hand, I thought, oh my God, what the heck did he do here? And then at the same time, I thought, okay, I'm gonna have some big shoes to fill. And yeah, and then when my mother died in 2014, it was again different experience because she was very supportive my entire life, and it was, I mean, again, I mean, now I just thought, you gotta be kidding me. I was just like, why now her? And even nowadays, like this is she died in 2014, and even nowadays, I just still have these moments where I'm thinking, why did you have to die? Like why I because there were so many things that we went through together, and there were things like she was it was like I was um and my father, he was the kind of person where she had to stay home and she was just like the housewife and all that, and then I was helping her, and I thought why she did, and like I was helping her along the road after his passing. I was helping her to discover who she was as a person. I started to like coach her, like introduce her to, like I started making friends finally, and I started introducing her to these people, and I thought, why? She started to have a life now. What the heck?
So
And
if I hear you,
mm-hmm,
basically your dad, as you said, was difficult. So I'm assuming to some
mm-hmm,
degree your mom was not able to fully be the person that she was because she was confined to whatever your dad
right,
the relationship was with your dad. So she really
exactly.
had those 7 years to like
Mm-hmm,
be something new. And
yes.
how do you feel like the family changed after your dad died?
Um, well, he was the CEO. That's the best way to describe it. He was the CEO of the clan. And after his passing, like few weeks after his passing, when I emotionally, mentally digested that fact, I realized, okay, the CEO is dead now. I'm the CEO, and I I don't know how to put it, but it was for me like seriously. I mean, on one
Yeah.
hand, I was like, okay, I'm an adult. I can't. I'm gonna have to handle this. But and I knew that my mother was going to support me because she just, and yes, I mean, she loved me. She was going to support me and she was going to guide me in her way. But at the same time, I thought, seriously, like, what the hell is going on? What's going on here?
But you had to take care of your mom, actually, if I
Yes,
understand correct.
yes, absolutely. Yes, I had to take care of her, and I can't. I mean, if you ask me how I did, I don't know how really. I mean, I just followed like I just followed the guidance of the story she shared with me, like how my grandparents took care of my mother before she got married, and I remember what my grandmother shared me stories about how things were when my mother was little, and this sounds crazy, but I became my mother's mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Hmm.
And I'm still like, and I mean, sometimes I tell to some close friends, like, I am her mother now. And they're like, what? Like, I, I know it sounds crazy, but I turned to be my mother's mother. And they're like, that's crazy. Like, she's your judge, like, you're her daughter. How can that be reversed? Like, welcome to my family.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was tough. I admit too.
So in a weird way, even though your dad was difficult, he created
Hmm.
some level of stability in the environment. So
Yeah,
when he was gone, it sounded like you actually had to become the stable person
yeah,
in the household.
yeah,
The
absolutely.
rock.
The rock, yeah.
Yep, yep.
Yeah. And how did that change you? Like, because I mean, we'll often have shows where we'll talk about people
Hmm.
like owning, like finally saying no, or like looking after themselves first. Like it sounds like for those 7 years, you probably didn't really look after yourself, I'm guessing. Like, how was that?
Right. I agree with you. Like after his passing, I thought, okay, it's time for me to take care of myself. And I did try that honestly. And my mother kept saying, listen, you're an adult, your father's not around, so it's time for you to now have friends, start dating, and all that what normal people, normal adults do.
Mm.
Um, but I mean, I tried it. I was working and I lost my former job. It was because I couldn't get the time off from grieving. But then I got another job. I got a career coach, went back to school. But at the same time, even though I was getting to know people, and there was this guy who I don't want to say dating because it just feels weird when I talk about that guy, but um, I was getting to know people, but at the same time, when I think back, I realized I was still focusing on what's best for my mother.
Yeah.
Like, because I was a breadwinner, I was taking care of her, and although I was in my 20s, but I was taking care of her. So even if I was like to look for a future husband, it was still about okay, who's right for my mother. That was like everything. Like, okay, I take care of myself. I'm working, I'm taking my education, but it's about providing for my mother. It was not only like
Wow.
maybe 30% or something. I was thinking really about myself all these years. Yeah.
You said a lot in this
Yeah.
little. Um, I'm gonna go to my curiosity.
Mm.
You said
Hmm.
that did you quit a job because you didn't have time to grieve? Did I hear you right
Right.
there?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I had to quit
Mm.
it. It was a job that I got while my father was around when I was younger. And my job, my life and my job was very difficult anyway because I was also taking care of him as well at the same time. And because my work schedule was not very flexible, and I said, okay, I need to take time off because I have to refocus now. And they said, and my supervisors were like, no, that's not possible. So they said we can't really give you time off. And I I how to put this? Um, I was trying to keep my dignity through all this stuff. And I said, okay, I'm going to leave the job. And I didn't care even at that point if I was going to have money bringing home. I didn't care about how I was going to pay the rent or anything like that. I just thought I need to
You made a
keep my
choice.
Yeah.
dignity. Yeah. And I had this suspicion that I would get fired eventually, and I thought, I know. I said I'd rather leave and say bye. I'm just have a good life or something like that, and just focus on my mother and just reassess my priorities at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Mm-hmm.
I got an insight as you're speaking. When my father died,
Mm-hmm.
actually, my father left the family when I was 15. He didn't die, but he kind of abandoned. He vanished, and I
Mm-hmm.
found him again later in my 30s. And for me, during that time, he was dead. Like I
Mm-hmm.
shut down emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
and that was my way of coping with him not being around.
Mm-hmm.
And I found him later on in life, and then he died 2 months later. So at least we had
Mm-hmm.
some connection. And it's only a few months ago that I got to know my father, and I feel he's more closer to me now than
Mm-hmm.
when he was alive, actually. And I'm wondering, how is that for you in terms of uh, your relationship changing now that they're both gone?
You ask a very good question. I appreciate your question. For my father, we've had difficult relationship actually since I turned 16. Approximately since I turned 16. Like that was the time when I realized in some ways that I'm an individual who has rights and views, and uh, I can't really explain what exactly happened, but there were some later occasions where I would say no, and he did not appreciate it, and our relationship became from there very difficult. After his passing, I remember I would keep looking at this picture, and I would just keep looking at it. Like, although he was dead, but I would look at his picture and I said, "Why did you do this to us? Why?" I just, because I don't know if it was my way of coming to terms with his death, or what he did to our family, but it was like my way of saying, "What was your problem?" And at some point, I stopped doing that. I don't know. I just felt like it was too much for me emotionally, and but I for many years, for the next 7 years, I wasn't really able to talk about him until I don't know 2000. For a couple of years, I just couldn't, like, I would talk about him, but I was like, I really don't want to talk about him. Later on, I started taking, like, attending circles with other women, and just meeting people who either were grieving or just going through their own transformation in their lives. And I got to a point where I said I need to reconnect with him in a way. And I thought, first, seriously, I hate this man with my guts. Like, how can I do that? But then I said, okay, I have to do this for my own sake. I have to learn because I need to learn to move on. Yes, he did a bunch of horrible things. I need to move on because I'm an adult now. He made his choices. For that reason, it's not my turn to make the right choices. I need to do like the right way, quote unquote. And so that's what I did. And that helped me heal.
Yeah.
And with my mother, I have to say, I often, after her death, like, I often have these moments, what my mother would say. And although she was really a horrible advisor when she was around, like,
She
every
was
time,
a.
because she a horrible advisor. Like, she couldn't really advise me very well. Like, I was the one. She would say, how do we do this? How do we talk to this person? Like, who am I? Like, am I your lawyer or something? It just,
Oh, that's Hammond.
and
Yeah.
And after her death, I was like, okay, there were some situations where I knew that she knew better than I did. And that I had certain weakness and strength, and there was something that where I was horrible, and she was like, "Oh, Jesus, we can handle this." Like, I learned this growing up, and I was like, "Okay, well, you take care of this now." But
Yeah.
then I just remember, okay, this is what she would say, and then later on with my relation, with my other future relationships, I said, okay, and then I would think, and then somehow I just knew when my mother um agreed, or when I was like when I started a new relationship and I knew my mother, I kind of I just felt her presence and I knew, okay, my mother definitely approves of this. I just
Yeah.
felt it and I thought, okay, I'm on the right track now. And
Mm.
yeah, so that's, I think for me, that's a part of my personality. Like that's part of my way of grieving, and at the same time, like, okay, it's gonna be all right.
Mm.
Can I ask one more question?
Please.
Um, like somehow when your father died, even though you were caretaking your mother, I'm wondering,
Mhm.
what did you like? Did you make any new discoveries? Did you two as women get to know each other in ways where if when your father was alive, you couldn't?
Not really, because we were always very close. It just so happened, it just because the way he acted, like I was a daddy's girl my entire childhood until I turned a teenager. And I mean, there were moments, I mean, uh, my mother did not tell me, I mean, never, in no point in my life did my mother say, do you say he's a horrible person? I don't want you to be his buddy or whatever. It was
Mm.
my, like, I followed my heart. And we just, I mean, we would just, anytime when we were sad, anytime when we felt lonely, even though we were together, but there were just situations where we just couldn't handle the world around us. And she would share stories with me, or she would say, do you remember what grandma said? Do you know? Or she would just share something from our family. And
Mm.
it was just very comforting to me. And then later oh, when he was gone, it was more, I don't know, it was more like repetition kind of, because it was like just us two girls together. And how should I put this? Like my grandmother and my mother were also very close when my grandmother was around. And my grandfather, he was away a lot for work or different responsibilities that he had. And again, it was like, oh, those two girls are like, around. Like, I mean, like their time, they would call those two girls, and then mother and daughter, and it was again like the quote unquote again the tradition. It, like the tradition continued, like the mother and daughter story. And
Mm.
I mean, we were always close. I know we were closer, but it was more like she. I would rather say that she was starting to get to know me from the more adult version of myself. I would
Mm.
rather say like I had more responsibilities and I was still her little girl, but at the same time I was now the woman who is now leading the clan.
Yeah.
Like I had to be like, and I would like, and then be like, okay, there are days when I like, mommy, I need a hug from you, and then there were days like, okay, I have to do this. I have to just, okay, let's pay the bills or let's talk to these people. Like, okay, you want,
Mm.
yeah, problem with my mother? What's going on here? Like that kind of thing. Yeah.
There's something that we haven't got
Mm-hmm.
into the
Mm-hmm.
your dad being a difficult. We just left him as the title difficult, which is fine
Yeah.
for the moment. But
Mm-hmm.
the one thing I've sort of noticed in my own life, and I'm curious if it's the same for both of you, is
Mm-hmm.
that once someone's gone, it tends to be the case that we'll look at the things that are the nicer qualities about that person in time, and
Mm-hmm.
then the negative ones tend to go less I don't know, spoken or seen, to the point where we
Mm-hmm.
could almost romanticize about them as if they were all those bad qualities never existed. So
Mm.
for the
Mm.
two of you, I don't know if that's also been your experience or how that's been.
Yes. I uh while he was around and after his passing, I could not really focus on the good things about him. I mean, there were very few good things about him, unfortunately. And later, I noticed when he was gone, maybe a few years after he was gone, I noticed that I had traits from him. Like there's something that
Mm.
I would do like he did. And later, oh my God, I'm trying to my father. Like I was freaking out. I thought, no, no, he was a bad person. I can't be like him. And
Mm.
I learned, and when I started healing my relationship with him by uh, by realizing, okay, I have to move on from whatever the person he was and make my own decision about who I want to be. I started looking at these traits that I had from him, and I decided to embrace them and see, okay, why am I actually doing this? Because there were like I was when I get overwhelmed, I there's something that happens to me when I get overwhelmed, and he was very similar when he got really often overwhelmed, and I decided, okay, I am acting similar to how he was acting, and so I started like saying, okay, this is why he probably was overwhelmed because he was anxious about something, or he was unsure of himself, and just by looking at how I responded to such situation, I started like, oh, that's why he was acting like this. And
Nice.
that was also part of my healing. I realized, oh, that's why he's doing this. And I started embracing it and saying, okay, this is why I'm acting like this. Okay, so how can I work on this? What's okay? Am I okay with it? Like, that's how I express my frustration. And so I just developed a healthy relationship with myself. And I started realizing, okay, well, there's some things I have from him, and I actually like them, surprisingly. Like, I have a stubbornness. He was very stubborn, and I do have some of it.
Really?
And I was told, yeah, I have some stubbornness, and I was, and I was told by someone, you have a stubbornness, but you sound, and I was told, I mean, I don't want to brag about, but someone told me actually, you know what, you have a stubbornness, but it's like you know how to use your stubbornness in a good way. Like you know how to,
It's a
like
tool.
he just was stubborn. Yeah, he did not know
Mm.
how to like he did not know how to say, okay, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stubborn, but okay, how can I use my stubbornness to improve something, to work on
Yeah.
something? I actually decide to improve on whatever need to be improved.
That's really beautiful. How you
Mm.
put it into context.
There was two things that jumped out at me. We often will talk about that similar theme on the show of what we
Mm-hmm.
project onto the other person is the thing that we can't acknowledge or embrace in ourselves. So that's
Mm-hmm.
something that we really spend a lot of time discussing. And there's a second point you made, which was something that you and I discussed, which I thought was really sweet 2 days ago when I was talking with Bambo. So we were discussing a little bit when we're looking at a person, you either see the behavior or you ask what created that behavior. And then, we even thought maybe we do a whole show on it. But when we only look at the behavior without any question as to what makes them behave that way, then we don't really have compassion for them in a way because we're judging the consequence of something that we're not even holding any space for, which is hard with difficult people because difficult, once we put them in the category of difficult,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to show compassion to somebody that we also hate, on
Mm-hmm.
one level, right? Hate's a strong word, of
Yeah,
course.
definitely.
Yeah.
But what you're speaking to has been really beautiful for me because now if I see someone I will allow the projection to come. I project this, but then it comes also with what makes this be for them, and then all of a sudden they're more human, and
Mm-hmm.
is not so much a judgment as or an exploration as to that part of them.
Yeah.
So thanks for he actually coached me on the show several times when he heard me using that language, and
Okay.
We
I,
try to discourage the coaching on the show because it confused people watching the
yeah,
show.
he hammered it in though.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, for me, when I used to share about my father, I came from a lot of anger. So I would just say he left us, he was abusive, he had mood swings, it just wasn't safe.
Yeah.
He would make a lot of jokes, and all of a sudden he's angry. So there were these two
Mm-hmm.
polarities playing. And yesterday, uh, I went to the sauna, and the woman I'm seeing right now, she said, "Can you share a little bit about your parents?"
Mm.
And I told her traditionally this is what I would say, but now if I'm going to talk about my father, I'm going to share that when he was 12 years old, he was captured by the British because his brothers were in the resistance against the British,
Mm-hmm.
and he was tortured for 2 months. And that little boy, when he came out of that, never came back as a little boy. He came back with a lot of anger and very destructive. So in a way, when I share that, there's more compassion in why he behaved the way he behaved. And I feel much more love for him as opposed to what a dick.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So what, if it's to the degree that you're comfortable, what made your father difficult besides being incapable of dealing with overwhelm?
To be honest, he was a lot of what you just described about your father. He would go ballistic over the most tiniest things. There was an expression that was often used around him when I was a little child. He was called a hot potato. Like he would get immediately insulted. Like he just, it was hard. Like on one hand, he wanted people to be honest with him, and on the other hand, he was like you couldn't say, okay, this is not okay. You can't act like this. Or he would get himself in trouble a lot, and he never took responsibility. He never even took part. He was immature. It just uh he he got arrested like I don't know how many times. I don't even want to know how many times. And he never took responsibility for his actions, and uh, mis- he did not respect anybody. He insisted that he had rights and that whatever he said that people should respect him. Like he expected red carpet everywhere.
It sounds like he
Uh,
had difficulty with authority.
yeah, and at home, like he tried to make he tried to control his behavior. Like I'm not sure if control is the right word, but he tried to be nicer sometimes. But that lasted maybe I don't know, maybe a week or so, and then it was like I'm the boss and you do as I say, and people are like, excuse you. And my late grandfather tried to help him. And I remember this, like my grandfather would say, "Listen, you're in trouble. I'm trying to help you, but you have to say at least, just admit to something that happened, and we're
Yeah.
trying to figure this out." No, like he, and I guess from him, I learned to always be transparent later in life. Like if I made a mistake, I'm gonna admit to it, even if I'm scared, even if I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go to jail. Like even if because I remember I had situations like, and even if he was not at fault, but someone said, okay, just go to a lawyer and get it figured out. No, he didn't want to know. He was doing everything himself. It was just at home. uh you just saying no to him was like it was like a crime. Like how dare you say no to him? It was like him, and just so many things that he was doing, and it was scary. Sometimes it was scary, sometimes it was crazy.
Mm.
It was really
When
hard.
when you were talking, there's so many. I mean, are the parallels in my life and your life are like
Mm-hmm.
I could have said everything except for my dad wasn't arrested several times. But other than that, no one in his family or our family would talk to him. Like everyone was
Mm-hmm.
at some point like just he's dead and we're not speaking anymore. But when
Right.
you said something that hit me, which was pretty, um, which is kind of interesting, was that my dad was very sensitive,
Uh-huh.
and his sensitivity was so strong that he would often get aggressive and angry when he felt like
Mm-hmm.
someone wasn't being authentic with him, because he could
Mm-hmm.
sense that. He could sense
Mm-hmm.
authenticity. And the humor was that since everyone knew how aggressive he could
Mm-hmm.
get, like you just said, they didn't want
Mm-hmm.
to share it with him because they were scared that he was going to blow up.
Mm.
And then the consequence
Wow.
was that he didn't realize that it wasn't that people weren't vulnerable. They just weren't vulnerable with him because they were
Mm.
scared of him.
Mm.
So it was this perpetual loop where no one would
Right.
share with them how they felt, and he'd blame them for being dishonest when in actuality they were just scared that
Mm.
I'm going to be attacked by this guy, so I have to be cautious. And
Mm.
he felt it, which triggered him even more. So it was this
Wow.
very screwed up circular loop of a negative loop, which you could never get out of unless one party had to change, and he wasn't going to change, so everyone else would have had to change. Where mostly people just avoided and ignored him because at some point you just said, I don't want this anymore.
Andy wrote 2 books, and I think in one of the books he says, I think he said, I told my dad I love you, and he said, stop trying to manipulate me.
Yeah. And the sad thing is that in time I realized he was right. I never thought of the word I love you being a form of manipulation. But I mean, you also have to look at the intention behind it. The love is the, like it's an honest expression, but he felt that there was manipulation because he now had to deal with the emotions that were going on inside of him, which he couldn't.
Right.
So he, instead of saying, wow, that's hard to take in, it was like, you're trying to manipulate me.
Wow.
That's hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, his book has a few good laughs when it comes to Papa.
Yeah, painful laughs with that. My dad was always wanting, he said, I really want one of my children to write a book. Like he was very, that's one of the things I heard him say a lot. And then I laughed and said, if he'd known I was going to throw him under the bus, I wonder if he'd still say he'd want to have his kids write a book.
Did you throw him under the bus?
I mean, I didn't, because I mean, in the end, we were really good friends. It took some time, and we were really close when he died. But the thing is that in writing the book, I had to regress to an earlier state of being with him because I had to write authentically how it felt to be a 13-year-old and acting like the adult, right? Because I always had to apologize to him for him yelling at me. So it was like he'd yell at me, he'd throw me out of the house, and then my mom would say, "You got to go apologize to your dad." And it was one of the most like I can remember feeling like at 13 years, like I didn't throw me out of the house. Why do I have to apologize to him, right? Yeah. But that was the role shift that had to happen. Is I had to apologize to him for telling him I wanted him to be more like a friend's father, right? Which was just sent him off into a frenzy.
It was authentic though.
It was authentic. He asked me what did he want? What did I want him to be? I want him to be more like, his father. And then that was it. We didn't talk for I think 2 years after that. Yeah.
Yeah, his father was difficult.
Yeah. But it was no different than your dad, I don't think, or yours for that matter. I think in a way what we all share is that we all had fathers that appeared on all of us to be very sensitive to what was going on and to others and incapable of dealing with their own emotion. So and it came out in contorted and in ways that like alienated other people and just created real trouble. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said a few months ago, I started discovering my father. I went back to my country, and because I'm more at peace with myself, I reunited with my father's family, who I hadn't seen from the age of 13 or something, 12 years old. And all of a sudden I'm tapping into all this love, and they're showing me pictures, and there's albums, and I get to see a little bit of my father in his childhood, and I'm hearing stories. So for me, it's been a real discovery of him. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no more the label difficult one. He's becoming humanized through that whole process.
Yeah. Are there any family alive from your parents, siblings? Do you have siblings, or are you alone in the world?
I am pretty much alone. My mother didn't have any siblings, neither do I. My father did not appear to have, but he had. So this was not much mentioned among my parents. Like there was so on my other side, there's barely anybody left. I tried to reach out to some distant relatives, but it's like they don't even know who I am, or like even if I mention like something that I know about my great grandparents, they're like, "Who are you again? Like, what's this about?" And it's most like wives who married into some families who don't know. I just have a sense that I'm more like I tried to reach out to some families who sounded like they were relatives, but at the same time, it felt like they were married to the family in a distant, like far distant cousins maybe, and like they don't know the stories. Like I would try to say, okay, this was my great grandfather, this is what our hypothetically our great grandmother did, or this is what was going on in our family, and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, sorry, wrong number.
Yeah.
On my father's
So how
side,
does that
and
feel?
then
How does that
yeah,
feel though? Because you're in the world now, and this is kind of
mm-hmm,
the core of this show for
yeah,
me, was that
mm-hmm,
you're in the world now, and
mm-hmm,
as I mentioned when we began, there's no like backstop. Like there's no one to take care of me outside of me emotionally. It doesn't matter if it's true
right,
or not. It's often a story we tell ourselves.
right,
So the
right.
question is, how has that been for you in terms of how you look at life now compared to when your parents were alive?
I feel like I'm the last person in the family who knows who is carrying the family tradition, for lack
Wow.
of a better wording. Like I remember every story that my mother shared with me, every story, every joke that was shared, every story about my granduncles acting up, like every kind of thing like that you share during holidays when you got your family together, when you say, oh yeah, you remember when great grandfather did this, or you remember when your brother drank, or you remember when this happened. Like
Mm,
I feel like I'm the last person. Like I'm kind of like the baby of the family, so to speak. Because my grandmother, so my maternal grandmother, she was the youngest of seven children, and she was considered the baby of the family that my mother was, and now I am the baby.
mm,
I just honestly, I feel like I'm the last person who has all these stories, and I was encouraged time to write a book
mm.
about it. I am thinking about doing it, but I just feel like it's on one hand I want to, but on the other hand I feel like I have to wait a little bit until like I am developing my own life right
Yeah.
now, and I am becoming who I am meant to be. And I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe in 10, 20 years, maybe I don't know, when I'm in a hotel manager or something, I don't know, when I have like my life established, I possibly will maybe even take pictures and put them into a book and
Yeah.
publish it, and maybe somebody will be reading and say, hey, wait a minute, I know that picture, like I know that person in the picture, like
Hmm.
maybe that will happen.
I have a
But
question about
yeah.
this because as you speak,
Mm,
I'm sure I can see Bambos also. We're both sort of, I see emotionally processing the reality as you speak.
mm,
And
yeah.
there's an interesting thing when you said, and this is something that I found interesting in my own life, is that
Mm-hmm.
when both parents died, and now all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden I'm now responsible for the unquotes culture, how I
Yeah.
want to live. And then
Mm-hmm.
in some ways you said I'm the last one left to carry the culture forward. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, as you're the last one, it's like at Christmas time or at
It's
whatever the
lonely.
holiday is. What I was gonna say, it's a hell of
Yeah.
lonely, obviously. And how is it when there are cultures or traditions? I don't want to say culture. When there's
Mm-hmm.
traditions that were what you did through your childhood, and then they're just not.
Mm-hmm.
There's not anyone to share them with at the moment. How is that to go
Yeah.
through it?
It's very sad.
Yeah,
I don't have children right now. I don't have, yeah, I mean, I'm still able to, but I don't have, I don't have a man in my life with whom like, I'm not at that point yet,
yeah,
unfortunately. And I mean, it does sadden me. I mean, right now I'm on camera, but and I rarely cry on camera. But I do have moments where I'm thinking, I really wish I could, um, I really wish I could like have kids and share with them so they could continue
yeah,
this, because I mean I'm not going to be around forever, obviously, and
yeah,
I love to have kids children to share, but and then when I realized, okay, well, what, and then I know I should slap myself in the face for this, but I play devil's advocate and I say, okay, well, what happens if I die tomorrow?
yeah,
And I think it's gonna suck.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I have to accept it. It's sad. I have to
Yeah.
accept it.
Yeah, I think one of the
Yeah.
hardest things I found, I was writing a chapter in I just finished a manuscript for the next book, and one of the chapters in the book was how I addressed a problem that I had most of my early childhood after my mom died, which was that I associated so much of my happiness with the holiday seasons. So when Christmas came around, I immediately felt like the joy because that was the most important holiday to my mom. And so what would happen would be when Christmas would come, or a week before or 2 weeks before, I'd already start feeling very, very depressed. It would be like the hardest time for me to go through.
No, you just got to me.
Yeah.
It just got me when you started talking about Christmas.
Yeah.
It just reminded me of something. Before my mother died, there were 2 holidays that were very important to us. Like actually 3 holidays, but 2 were very important, like Thanksgiving and Christmas. I can't tell really why Thanksgiving, but Christmas, my birthday is around that time. And she made a big fuss about it that I was working during one of the holidays. And I said, it's just Thanksgiving, like big deal. And I have to admit that after her passing, I said, I am not missing any of those freaking holidays anymore. No.
Yeah.
And it just got to me. I didn't want to crack out, but this was like.
Yeah. And when I was in that situation, I saw that since I wasn't able to manage my emotions, what it would happen would be if situations came up that were uncomfortable, I would overreact to them, or I wouldn't be able to so I remember at the time I was with a girlfriend and I bought her a gift and her family told her about the gift and I asked them not to. And for me, that was like the biggest thing. Like, you destroyed this incredible thing, and I want it to be a surprise, and it's not a surprise. And so I felt all of this emotion come up, and I started to. It turned into like an explosion, and I was leaving the house because and then as I'm kind of grabbing my shoes, and actually one of her sisters at the time grabbed my shoes and hid them, so I couldn't leave the house. It was kind of a really beautiful moment.
I like her.
And I couldn't leave, and then all of a sudden in that moment I had the epiphany, because at some point you realize how absurd it all is, and then that was when I kind of slowed down, and then I brought everyone to the table because everyone was involved by this point. The whole family is like, what the hell's going on? And then I shared with them why I not only the behavior was less important, it was more what's going on, like what's really going on right now and why this is so hard for me. And I realized it went from like a really bad situation into a really beautiful moment, because it was the first time in my life I really acknowledged the pain of her not being there, which was the hardest thing up to that moment to really embrace. Yeah.
Wow.
So we're still very close because of that, me and the family. Yeah. We talked about the negative side of things. I'd like to flip it a moment and say, how great is it to get rid of that fucking asshole?
Oh my goodness.
It's one of ththose moments where if anyone sees this part, he's gonna get hate mail.
like there's a one thing that's like the hardest thing is like when we lose somebody that was a real pain in the ass. Like there's the part of the loss side of it, and then there's the relief side, and no one wants to acknowledge that there's also a relief in getting rid, and there's almost a guilt, like I shouldn't feel relief around getting rid of this pain, but like I think it's not genuine not also to embrace that.
Right.
So yeah. So how is
And our dear friend Budalang says, when a person dies, I become less worried about things in them that made me uncomfortable because they will not happen
any longer. Yeah.
Absolutely. Same here.
But there's a question in there. Like, was there a bit of challenge in there for you to feel I'm also a bit relieved? Or was there any of that? Because you said you grieved, but was some of the grief also confusion? That's the question. Like, I shouldn't
Yeah.
be comfortable.
With my father, I rarely had the feeling like I shouldn't be grieving him. Like, no. On one hand, I thought I should be grieving him because I mean I didn't really discuss that with my mother really per se, but on one hand, when I was grieving for him, I thought, well, he's my father, and my mother never had a problem grieving because I mean he was our person, but at the same time he was my father.
Yeah.
And she always said, he's your father. I'm not ever going to say anything wrong about him. Even after he was gone, she said, listen, no matter what he did, he's your father. And I'm not going to, like, if you love him, that's between you both. And I, after his death, it was shock because, like, wow, he's dead now. And it took us a while, it took me a while to, like, besides the responsibilities, I realized, oh, I can, like, we would go out together and realize we don't have to worry about him yelling at us. Like we can do whatever we want. That was the one, like we could do finally things. We were not that I mean there were a lot of things he did not allow us to do that were like going to the movies and just basic normal things. And after his death, like, nobody's gonna yell at us anymore. We can go to the movies or even if I went out or is it go have friends. You like go have friends. Do whatever. You're young. You just have your life. Enjoy life.
There's
Like,
a kind of
wow,
relief.
I can
Wow.
do that. Yeah, yeah,
Did you ever go
definitely.
out and hear his voice? Like, oh shit, we're doing this, and kind of reliving the panic, or were you really free of it?
Um, only once. Like 2012, no, 2014. I can't remember which. 2000 before her death, 2013, 12, 2012 sorry, about 2012 or 2013. I started volunteering just it's something where I was just helping military families, and I was really proud of this accomplishment. My mother's very proud, and I just suddenly like started sensing my father, and I just had the feeling like he was not appreciated. He did not like this, and and I told my mother that, and she's like, "That's his problem, not yours."
Yeah.
like, like you are doing what makes you happy. If he doesn't like it, I mean, I mean, if it's jealousy or whatever, that's his problem, not yours. Do you?
Yeah. Yeah. You
Yeah.
should be taking care of me, not of the soldiers.
You're right.
My dad once said the world
Yeah.
revolves around me. I'm God. That's what he said in our
Yeah.
household. Yes.
Yeah.
He did say that, Bambos.
I'm
Yes.
sure he did. And you called him Jesus?
Yeah, I don't know what. I didn't call him anything. I was so scared of
God.
him. I was like, I
Mm.
lived on eggshells when he was. I mean, the one thing that we also
Mm.
mentioned on some shows was that when
Mm-hmm.
one individual in a family unit dies, the whole configuration is sort of goes through a weird
Mm.
shifting process of
Yep.
who's taking which role and how does it become. And I noticed that when my dad died, because my mom, as I said, died when I was 19 or 18. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And when my dad died, some 10 years ago or so. And what I saw was that after he'd always been a point of dissension. There was always one
Mm-hmm.
person in the family not talking to him, at least one, sometimes two,
Mm.
sometimes not usually three, because I think he always felt like he needed to have contact with at least one of the three so that
Mm-hmm.
that he had the
3 sons.
so the presentation wasn't as bad. Because if he didn't have to talk with any of the three, he would then say, "I look like bad." So I'm gonna have one, and then the other
Mm.
two can be on the outs. But um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where I was going with this now.
Oh, then I'm gonna ask something.
Oh, yeah, please.
What was something that you take with you from your parents?
Um, the different qualities from both of my parents. So from my mother's side of the family, I definitely take their, I should put this. Okay, I'm just going to use the words because I want to say something between the lines, but it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel authentic. So there I had my mother's side of the family, they were huge on diplomacy. So it was all about being respectful even to people when they were being difficult in any way, shape, or form. So from her family, I have be respectful, treat everybody like a CEO, no matter who they are, where they come from. That was her stance. For my father, I would say I have his stubbornness, as I mentioned. I have his determination, though he did not really use it in a good way, but I realized I have his determination. Like, if something is important, I'm gonna work, I'm gonna do it. It's important to me. Um, and yeah, and just yeah, and from my mother's side again, I have the quality of being grateful. Like, there are, of course, you're gonna have days when life is horrible, when you're thinking, why am I alive? You're gonna have those days. And my mother's side of the family, I've just heard so many stories about how they went to different wars, and it was all about we're family, we're together, and or we're grateful we have a bed to sleep on. Like, there was always something they were grateful for, and I just kept that from, not kept that from, but I just, like, every time I'm going through a difficult situation, I think about what my mother's side of the family would do in this or similar situation. Yeah, just treating everybody like a CEO, being respectful to everybody, even when you
Yeah.
think like, what's their problem? That or and gratitude, definitely.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
We've come to our hour.
Yeah, I noticed I had to take a lot of deep breaths during the show because I caught myself holding my breath. Thank you.
Thank you.
So always are the more emotional shows. Thank you for coming on to discuss this, especially since, as I said earlier, this had nothing to do with anything that you said you wanted to discuss. And we happened to pick the one little detail that I thought would be making a very curious show. And I really do appreciate that you allowed yourself to be with us for this. It was really, really beautiful.
Yeah, thanks for your vulnerability and
Yeah.
for how you showed up for the hour.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We
And
send
thank
you
you
love.
for having me. Thank you as
It's-
well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who was watching today. There were a lot of comments coming in. Magda, thank you. With love, she lost a parent recently, so clearly. Pat Legaly in the U.S., feeling empathetic for the situation. And Bolalang had a few comments, right? He also said early in the show when I said the question of which makes you feel bad, dying before their partner or the partner dying before them sucks. I agree, Bolalang. That's a shitty question.
So, do you want to answer it anyway?
I clearly would not want to have to deal with the pain of the loss of having Ronnie go before me, clearly.
Yeah. So she feels the same.
Yeah. We have one more show. And just because we want to keep an upbeat, happy, I got it. I already got it.
What is it?
We got Ian Hale on. He's going to come in to talk about his suicide attempt. Just because we want to keep this show on a very high level of upbeat, exciting, happy. And I think, subjects like these, we take them on because we do want to hear what people learn from the experience. We don't want to just harness on the experience, but just feel into it. You obviously have had some of your own experiences there. I have had the desire at times too, but never actually gone any too close to the actual thing. I have a trouble looking at bridges. If I'm on a bridge, almost, I don't know how it is for you, but I always have this imagine, wow, I could jump off right now. Like, I kind of sometimes have to step back because I feel how easy it would be just to jump off.
Oh, I have it with driving cars. If I'm driving a car at high speed, I can feel into how easy it is to let go.
Just let go. Yeah. So it's
so
funny.
We're gonna end it in this happy
on this
note.
very happy, upbeat mode, because that's what we do here, and we're gonna do that and a lot more, Bambos, on a wonderful chaos.